So for years, Bitcoin's place in US government policy was uncertain. But yesterday, that changed. The United States has officially established a strategic Bitcoin reserve. This isn't speculation, this isn't a proposal, this is now law. So the US will hold all 198,109 Bitcoin that it has obtained through forfeiture proceedings and will not sell any of it. Not only that, the government is now actively developing budget neutral strategies to acquire more Bitcoin. This is a monumental shift, and it's bigger than most people realize. So let's break it down. This EO established two things, as you can see in the name, a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a US digital asset stockpile. So to clear up any confusion, right, the executive order establishes these two distinct holdings. Number one is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. This is where all of the US government's Bitcoin will be held, a full audit will be conducted, budget neutral strategies will be explored to accumulate more of it, and none of this Bitcoin will be sold. The US digital asset stockpile, on the other hand, is where all the non-Bitcoin digital assets obtained through forfeiture will go. However, the government will not develop a strategy to acquire more non-Bitcoin assets, and there wasn't any specification on not being able to sell them. So in short, Bitcoin stays and crypto doesn't necessarily need to. This was not an impulsive decision. Experts like Matthew Pines at the Bitcoin Policy Institute have been discussing this as the most logical step for the US government to take, reclassify what it already owns in a formal reserve structure. And now that's exactly what has happened. But the real breakthrough is that the government isn't stopping at holding Bitcoin. The United States is on the cusp of becoming an active Bitcoin accumulator. Here is the key line from the executive order. I'll read this word for word. It says the Secretaries of Treasury and Commerce will develop budget neutral strategies for acquiring additional Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Not crypto, not altcoins, Bitcoin. And here's why this is historic. The US is not just recognizing Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, it is actively planning to acquire more. And it has distinguished Bitcoin from crypto by separating these two things by language in the executive order. Think about the implications of this. The world's largest economy has formally acknowledged that it sees an advantage in stacking Bitcoin early before its supply becomes even more constrained. And they've given the green light to find ways to do it without increasing costs to taxpayers. So how does that work? How can the US government buy Bitcoin without spending new money? Well, the phrase budget neutral is crucial. It means the US will not print money or raise taxes and use those proceeds to buy Bitcoin. Instead, it will find ways of developing funding mechanisms using our existing assets. Here's a few ways that could happen, and these come mostly from Matthew Pines of the Bitcoin Policy Institute. Number one is the Exchange Stabilization Fund. The U.S. has about $39 billion sitting in surplus in this fund. This money is already allocated. It just isn't being used efficiently. That could be moved to Bitcoin. We could also sell special drawing rights, or SDRs, from the IMF. The U.S. holds $160 billion worth of SDRs, and these could be converted into USD and swapped for Bitcoin. The third is revaluing gold certificates. A revaluation of gold certificates could free up $800 billion, and this wouldn't be unprecedented. The U.S. has done this before. And the fourth would be privatizing government-sponsored enterprises, or GSEs. Selling stakes in entities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac could provide hundreds of billions of dollars in liquidity. And yes, even cheese. Strangely enough, the U.S. holds 1.4 billion pounds of cheese in Missouri limestone mines, and at current CME futures prices of $1.79 per pound, as of the March 2025 contracts, that cheese stockpile is worth $2.506 billion. Of course, that varies depending on the type of cheese. If the government were to sell all of its cheese holdings and convert the proceeds into Bitcoin, it would have an additional $2.5 billion to allocate to the strategic Bitcoin reserve without raising taxes or increasing the deficit. So all these funding sources are sitting idle, but they could be repurposed to stack Bitcoin. The government isn't just holding its Bitcoin, it's actively looking for ways to accumulate more. And here's what's crazy. When this news broke, Bitcoin dropped 3.5%. And the reason is because people don't seem to understand what's happening, or they were expecting more. This isn't a government trying to regulate Bitcoin out of existence. It is the polar opposite end of the spectrum. It's the US government positioning itself to become one of the largest Bitcoin holders in the world and start actively accumulating more. And the market has not priced this in. The EO, as I said, explicitly acknowledges not only Bitcoin's strategic importance, but it even states, and I'll put it up here on the screen, Because there is a fixed supply of Bitcoin, there is a strategic advantage in being among the first nations to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. This is not a random statement. That's an official admission that accumulating Bitcoin early provides a geopolitical advantage. So the real question is, what happens when other countries wake up to this? The reality is the global Bitcoin accumulation race has begun, and the US just fired off the starting gun. Now that America has declared its intention to hold and accumulate Bitcoin, other nations will be forced to make a choice. Number one, start acquiring Bitcoin now to keep up. Or number two, sit on the sidelines and watch the US solidify its lead. It's not hard to see where this is going. The moment one major economy follows suit, it forces every other country to consider the same move. This isn't just about reserves anymore, it's about global positioning. And here's the final takeaway. If the US government sees Bitcoin as a critical strategic asset, what do you think you should be doing? Stack accordingly. That's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind, if you found value in this video, please follow, like, and reshare so that you can get this into the hands of as many people as possible. And of course, check out Theia. It's the world's simplest Bitcoin self-custody solution. You can use it on iPhone, coming soon to Android and web. You can go to theia.us or check it out with the QR code right there. That's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.